Hi guys, so welcome back. Good to see you all again. So actually we're going to talk about another topic this afternoon, which is survivable hop compounds and the research behind it and how you can apply that to your brewing. It actually links in quite nicely to the presentation given by our friends at Lallemand, which wasn't planned, but it's a nice coincidence there. So it leads on to a lot of things that were spoken about earlier. So survivable hop compounds and the research behind it is quite new. Something we've been leading, and it's all about how do we get the raw hop aroma you smell in the field and in the picking machines and in the kilns, and how do you get that into the finished beer? What can you do to the raw hops themselves, but also in your process to capture all of those? So as before, for anyone who didn't see the original presentation earlier this morning, just a brief overview of Yakima Chief. We have missions, visions, and values, which are at the heart of all that we do as a company globally. So our mission is to connect our family hop farms. We're owned by hop growers. 100% of what we do is owned by hop growers. To connect those family hop growers with the world's finest brewers and home brewers, which is keen to emphasise. To provide you guys with the highest quality hop products and uncompromising service for the ultimate benefit of our customers, employees, and growers. And our vision is to be the global hop supplier of choice. We want our passion for preserving the planet, treating people with respect and dignity, and our commitment to healthy communities to be reflected in every beer brewed with our product. And then at the heart of that are our 5 key values, which spell out pride, which are passion, respect, integrity, dedication, and excellence. So that's at the core of all that we do globally, and we like to think it comes through in our service, but also in our final product as well. So as I mentioned, we are owned 100% by hop growers. We're the only hop company globally who are 100% grower-owned, so we're really proud to work for those hop growers and represent them. So we've got an overview of the growers on the screen here. Some of these grower families have been harvesting hops since the 19th century, so have picked up a fair bit of experience along the way. You're talking 6th, 7th, 8th generation farmers. So we're really pleased to work with those guys and represent them out in the market. So alongside those hop growers that own the company, we also receive hops from around 50 other grower families throughout the Pacific Northwest. So Pacific Northwest is typically 3 states, so Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, which are the 3 hop growing states that make up that Pacific Northwest region. So behind this research, we've got a really strong culture of innovation. We've got our R&D lab with many qualified lab and sensory specialists who have worked in the beer industry for decades, either as on the sales side or as a production side or chemists. We've got a brand new state-of-the-art R&D lab, which is all about upholding our standards, but also with research such as this, doing new research, trying to lead the way. Our research brewery, see on the screen there, that's our colleague JT. His job is to brew beers every day for research. I think so far this year he's brewed about 70 beers, so he's a busy guy. But his experience, he was a commercial brewer before this, his experience and his knowledge is vital to helping these products come to market and make this research come to light. Between all of those departments, they've worked together on this Survivavbles project, which we'll go through in further detail now. So let's get into it. Skipped one there. So as I say, we've got our R&D team who undertake cutting-edge hop analysis. We can now analyse hops at greater detail than ever was possible. Hops contain over 1,000 hop compounds, and the more detailed the equipment becomes, the more hop compounds we'll find. They're such a complex and interesting product. While just doing some general research, we came across some of these compounds which we're going to discuss today. And one point below there, which is linked to our grower network, is, as I mentioned in the presentation this morning, we receive approximately 40 million pounds, which is 18,000 metric tons of hops a year, about 40% of the US harvest. So this allows us, when we're coming up with these blends and doing this research, we can pick the best of the best, the cream of the crop, quite literally, to make these blends as impactful as they can be. So, yeah, as I mentioned, hops have over 1,000 different hop compounds and growing. You've got some which were actually discussed by the guys at Lallemand earlier, some terpenes and some esters, sulfur compounds, all of which contribute to hop aroma. But when we talk about hop survivables, what we mean is the hop compounds that survive the brewing process, all the stress of the brewing process. Because when we put those hops in beer, we really put them under some stress. So we boil them, we spin them round, we break them apart, then we put them in the fermenter, then the yeast will attack some of those hop compounds and transform them, again, as Lanneman went into earlier. And also just the CO2 within the beer will aggressively impact some of those hop compounds. So when we did this research, across thousands of different hop compounds, we came across the same 7 to 10 compounds that kept popping up in the finished beer. And so we wanted to investigate, what are they, what do they do, what do they contribute? So by doing that, basically brewed a beer and reverse engineered this beer to find out which hop compounds came from which hops and how can we lock in as many of those. So we're going to go into some basic hop chemistry. I'm not a hop chemist, I will phrase that now. So we'll try and keep it quite simple. I won't go into too many scientific terms, though I've been told that one of the guys who works for Brouwland is a hop chemist or a biochemist. So if you get any detailed scientific questions, I'm going to point you towards him, just so you know. He doesn't know that. So, okay, so if we start off with terpenes. So terpenes make up a very large percentage of overall hop oil, but they're very volatile and actually hydrophobic. So they have very low solubility. So a general rule, as it's mentioned on the slide there, if the compound ends in "ene," it rarely makes the scene or doesn't make the scene. So there's a good chance that you'll put that in, but it won't actually dissipate into that beer or into that wort stream. So some of these commonly found terpenes, you might be familiar with some of them, things like myrcene, farnesene. Myrcene can be up to 75% of a hop's total oil, which is a huge quantity. But extremely volatile with very low solubility. So you can see the terpenes generally have quite similar characteristics, quite herbal, quite woody, quite earthy, pine in there as well. So sort of classic hop aroma, I guess. So these survivable compounds form sort of three categories. So we've got the monoterpene alcohols, the soluble esters, and the polyfunctional thiols. We'll just sort of have a brief look at all of those, and you read these long scientific terms, and you think, what does that actually mean? What is that flavour? So we'll try and go over some of those and help translate those for you. So if you take one thing away from this, survivability kind of equals solubility. So when you're throwing all those hops in, what's going to be soluble and what's going to survive that brewing process, as we say. So one word is survivable. So keep that in mind. So terpene alcohols, they're related to terpenes, but they're far more soluble. So again, one of sort of the phrase there, if it ends in "ol," you just might get it all. It kind of rhymes, but you get the idea. So they're far more soluble. And again, some of those were mentioned earlier in the presentation, but you may have heard of some of these like geraniol and linalool as well, which are, again, quite commonly found. So geraniol. So again, it's one of the highest proportion hop oils in there. And what is it? It's a terpene alcohol. And what does it smell like? As you can imagine, geraniol, geraniums. It's quite floral, quite citrusy. And there we have a note there that it can be biotransformed by certain strains of yeast into beta citronellol during fermentation, which again is a hugely powerful citrus-like compound. So which hops have the most of these? We've got hops like Talus, which we've got for the guys in the audience here today to smell downstairs with some samples. That's a newer variety. Centennial is extremely high in geraniol, classic hop. I'm sure you've all used Centennial once upon a time. Cryopop, which is the new hop blend, which we'll get onto later, which you've got a sample here, you guys, and then Sabro and Chinook. And then linalool. Again, another monoterpene alcohol. It was the first hop oil discovered in beer in the 1970s. It's used commonly in the cosmetics and the fragrance industry because it's so potent. Strong fruity aroma. An American colleague of mine put this presentation together. So I've never had Fruit Loops cereal, but I've been reliably told that they're extremely fruity, very sweet, almost candy-like characteristic. Really intense. So good stuff. You want to be keeping hold of that if you can. And then you've got some esters and ketones. So esters are the third most abundant class of hop oil compounds. Approximately 15 I should say, of hop oils are made up of esters and ketones. They're found in the bracteoles of the hop cone. So that's the sort of voids beneath the leaf material where all the lupulin is stored, and those contain all of that essential oil. Again, quite classically fruity, and if it ends in 8, it probably tastes great. So that's a good one to remember as well. So again, we've got some examples there, and I'll go through those and sort of what they actually present into the finished beer. So we've got some here. So we've got 2-MBI, I'm going to say. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that one, but 2-methylbutyl isobutyrate, well, I'll go for it anyway, is quite apricot-y. It's a real stone fruit, really intense sort of juicy fruit flavour. And then isoamyl isobutyrate, again, highly survivable, and that's got a real pineapple aroma. So again, if you're brewing any kind of pale ale or IPA, those are 2 characteristics you're going to want to have in there. Pineapple and apricot, delicious. We've got methyl geranate, which is, again, linked to geraniol. Again, highly survivable and understandably has a very fruity and floral aroma. And Centennial, in particular, is very high in this particular compound. And then we've got 2-nonanon, which is a ketone. Pretty wide-ranging. It's a pretty complex one, this. We've got a picture of some gummy bears there, but it also can be quite cheesy and buttery as well, which, maybe not first on your list for things you want from hops. But again, gummy bears, that sweet fruit candied, again, is something you're really looking for. So, and then we go on to sulfur compounds. There's a lot of work being done into sulfur compounds and thiols, especially linked to the subject of biotransformation. Really difficult to detect using conventional equipment that we've got, and they're actually found in very small quantities, but as humans, our nose is really sensitive to these. So if ever you open maybe a packet of hops or a beer and there's some sulfur in there, usually you go, wow, and it really jumps out, doesn't it? That sort of really classic sulfuric character. So we've got some commonly found sulfur compounds that we'll go through on the next slide here. So we've got 3-mercaptohexanol, or 3MH, commonly found in hops. So it's got a real tropical and grapefruit aroma. So again, something like Nelson Sauvin or other hops that are Chinook, that are classically grapefruity, tend to have high proportions of these compounds. It often adds really favourable beer flavour and aroma. But in too high concentrations, some of these sulfur compounds can maybe be quite rubbery or solventy. So again, it's all about balancing our hop additions and finding the right hops in the right places. So again, high in things like Centennial, Chinook, Idaho 7, Mosaic, Sabro, all have high levels of this compound. That's an overview of the compounds. And then all of this research, so you've got your handbooks in front of you, and we've got a link going out in the chat, which is bit.ly/thispdf. So if you want to follow that link, it will bring you up to our Survivable's handbook. So you want to open your handbooks to pages 8 and 9. So essentially, all this research led to this graph. So we think this could be really important to brewers and really help them look at where to use certain hops. So one key point from the outset on this is not a good v bad graph. This isn't saying that Centennial is an amazing hop and Cascade's a bad hop, because we know they're both great hops. It's all about where to use hops based on how many of these survivable compounds they contain, where to use these, where in the process, which variety to use, which hops to use in combination. What you don't want to do is use 2 hops that have the same proportions of all these compounds because you're just going to double up. You want a nice variety of these. Moving on to the next one. So essentially, on the left, we've got hops that are high in these survivable compounds. And hops with higher concentrations of survivable compounds have a better likelihood of being successful when used earlier in the brewing process. So essentially, you're putting hops in earlier that have higher levels of these compounds, more is going to survive through into the finished beer. So, for example, we've got an example here, Idaho 7 compared to Cascade. Idaho 7's got a far greater concentration of these compounds, so using that early in the brewing process, you're going to have more survive. If you use Cascade earlier on, there's a good chance that very little, if not all of those compounds won't survive. So, So as we say, use high survivable hops early and use low survivable hops late on. So if you want to get the best out of a hop like Cashmere or Cascade, we know they're fantastic hops. Use them later on because there's less chance that they will be impacted by the stresses of this brewing process, and we'll be able to get the best out of those. So yeah, when we define these time periods, we have early meaning late kettle, so 5 to 10 minutes before the end of boil, flame out, whirlpool, or AFDH, which stands for an active fermentation dry hop. So when the beer is at high Krausen, get those hops in there, and then you will get some interaction with the yeast as well, as discussed earlier. And then later in the brewing process is post-fermentation dry hop, when the yeast activity has ceased or is slowing down, and there's less chance that there'll be some interaction, and therefore removal of some of these survivable compounds. So yeah, as I hinted at just a second ago, what you don't want to do is really be using hops that have similar proportions of these compounds. Balance them, so you look at something like Laurel and Talus, which is a blend there. They're both got different proportions, different blends, so you're going to get a more complex, more interesting, more dynamic blend. Whereas if you use, say, Laurel and Crystal together, as you can see, their makeup is actually quite similar. So you're just going to sort of double up on some of these and get not a one-dimensional beer, but a less three-dimensional beer, put it that way. And ultimately, what you want to do is load your work stream with as many of these survival compounds as possible. So use the right varieties in the right place. So, load your whirlpool or end kettle with Idaho 7, Simcoe, and Sabro, and you're going to have a work stream full of survival compounds ready to go through fermentation, and you'll have some to come out the other end. Ultimately, this research, we used it to put together a blend. How can we put together a blend that's got a good range of all of these compounds, these commonly occurring compounds, but also a blend that's got a high proportion of these. So I would phrase this now. For any questions that are coming up, I don't know the blend. It's a company secret, so I don't know what go into it. If anyone decides to ask, I genuinely don't know, so I'll get that in early. We came up with Cryopop, which is a supercharged pellet. And the idea is that it provides brewers with a dynamic solution for juicy, fruit-forward, and highly aromatic beer styles. It's got massive tropical stone fruit and citrus aromas. It's sort of the beginning of a whole new interesting line of research, really. Sort of what can we do with this information? What hop products can we produce? So, again, I've got some samples downstairs. And, guys at home, if you want to contact your retailers and see if they've got any in stock or can get some in stock, I highly recommend it. It's a truly excellent, stunning product. So, and just as a brief sort of pause here, we've actually developed this sensory lexicon, which is a really great way of describing both hops and beer. So that's on pages 20 to 21 of your handbook. So if ever you're trying to taste beer or assess some hops, you think, oh, it smells like tropical, but what is it? Is it coconut, or is it pineapple, or is it passion fruit? It might help you just really, pinpoint those aromas. And the same for finished beer as well. If you're tasting your beers at a homebrew club or at a bar or whatever it might be, it's a really useful tool. So that's on pages 20 to 21 on the PDF and in your physical books as well. So Cryopop blend. So it's kind of a go-to kind of just fully loaded, super intense hop product that again, is ideal for these hazy fruit-forward beers that we all love, I believe. I know we're in Belgium here today, so I know you guys have got other beers that you're in love with. But yeah, if you're looking to make a hazy fruit-forward beer style, then I wouldn't look any further. So you can either use it as a single edition, use that as the only product that goes in, but it's quite interesting in how it plays around with other hops as well and what you can do with it. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about trying to get those raw hop aromas into the finished product and maximising the contributions there. So what I've got here, again, we can send them out later, but we've got some trial recipes. So this is a New England IPA brewed 100% with cryopop, and you can see there how they're using it. No hops go in before flame out, so you're looking for around 25 IBU. So yeah, the first hop addition is at flame out actually, and then you've got 2 dry hops, one during active fermentation and one during post-fermentation, one post-fermentation. So yeah, it's one application. And the next one is use it as almost, I had a customer describe it as almost like MSG for hops, like a special seasoning to really amplify an existing hop recipe. So if you guys have got, at home a pale ale or an IPA or a session IPA that is dialed in, and you go, I don't want to change that, but how can I maybe get a bit more out of it? Brew it the same, but maybe add some cryopop, and it will elevate and interact with the hops you already got in there, and just generally boost the hop character in there. So yeah, this is a West Coast IPA brewed with Simcoe, Citra, Mosaic, and Talus. And again, the cryopop goes in just at the dry hop stage, just to really put the icing on the cake, so to speak. You've got a great beer there, but what you're doing is you're adding more late on, just to really lift the whole beer. And then we've got a juicy pale ale brewed with cryopop, Idaho 7, and Citra. So this is looking for lots more biotransformation. So there's a large dry hop addition during active fermentation, and then a final addition post-fermentation as well. And that really helps all those survivable compounds that we've discussed interact with that yeast strain. And the yeast strain they're using there is London Ale 3. I don't know if any of you guys have used that, but it's a ale strain, classic English ale strain that proves to be perfect for these juicy, hazy styles because it has the right amount of biotransformation there and really seems to work well with certain hop compounds. And then we did an experiment here just to kind of explore the differences in results you get from using cryopop in active fermentation and post-fermentation. If everyone can see that is in your handbook on 22 to 24, if my head's blocking that screen. But yeah, the lines in red, this is a spider chart. This is what we use for sensory analysis within the company. And it's graded sort of 0 to 100 on a percentage scale. So the red lines indicate using cryohop during active fermentation, and the blue lines are post-fermentation. So you can see, generally speaking, there are some similarities, but we get a greater spike in the sweet aromatic, the tropical, citrus, when the hops were used during active fermentation. During post-fermentation, we saw more woody and herbal characteristics, while still having plenty of, those sweet aromatic, stone fruit and tropical. But it's quite interesting to see, obviously, because of that yeast interaction and that biotransformation, the amount we saw. So this was done sensory analysis by our sort of qualified, trained sensory panelists over in the US. And that led on to a second experiment, which is to show how hops work together. So what we did, we brewed 2 beers, one with the cryopop blend and one exactly the same, but using the hops that go into the blend individually, adding them individually. So you can see that the red line again is the blend, and the blue line is actually all the beers brewed single hop with each individual hop, then blended into a final package, into a final keg. So you can see again we've got greater spikes on all the floral, sweet aromatic, berry, stone fruit, tropical characteristics. So again, it shows that how when you're adding all of those hops at once as a blend, how with the sort of the synergy between A, the hop compounds, and B, also the yeast can really yield you greater results. So yeah, these are the kind of things we do sort of back at base to kind of validate our research. Really, it's nice to see that come to fruition. So, yeah, that's the end of the presentation. So, I'd love to move into some questions if possible. And yeah, we've got questions coming in from the live stream, and also if anyone's got any questions in the audience here, then I'll be delighted to answer them. No questions? Okay, great. Perfect. And then, yeah, we've got the hops here. So, yeah, we can go downstairs afterwards and smell some of the cryopop and, you know, really get a feel for it. So, and you can, yeah, have a play around with it and see what you can get. Thanks, guys. Cheers.